Welcome to all of you. We are delighted to have you join us for today's session of the Leadership Lecture Series organized by the Office of Alumni and Corporate Relations IIT Madras. Through this series, we bring you conversations with thought leaders, innovators, and industry pioneers who are driving meaningful change across sectors. And today, we are honored to welcome back one of our own alumni, Mr. Gaurav Sawhney. Yeah. So, in his current role, Mr. Gaurav Sawhney leads models and AI strategy for Barclays Treasury and also steers the bank-wide business user group for AI. His work sits at the interaction of finance and technology, shaping how a global institution like Barclays innovates using artificial intelligence. Over the course of his career, Mr. Gaurav has held leadership roles across treasuries, finance, risk functions, not just at Barclays, but also at leading US banks like Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. His focus has consistently been on leveraging technology to deliver measurable business outcomes. We are honored to have you, Mr. Gaurav Sanve, here with us today to speak on highly relevant and forward-looking topic, AI for banking and finance. Let's put our hands together and welcome him to the stage.
Thank you everyone for firstly coming on a Friday evening. I'm really grateful for you to invite me back. It's been an absolute pleasure to kind of get back to the campus. I visited the campus after 16 years last year, and it always fills me with nostalgia coming back. And it's a great honor to kind of join you today to talk about a bit about AI in banking and finance. And before I kind of dive into that space, I thought I'll just give you a quick kind of backdrop to myself itself. So I kind of started my journey just under 2 decades ago here at IIT Madras. I joined the Department of Management Studies and graduated in 2008. And as part of that kind of experience, which was quite formative in my own career, it allowed me to kind of continue to adapt as I went through my career journey itself. Um, I'll give a preface right up front. I am not a techie, even though I did my computer science engineering. So I pivoted from my background in technology towards finance. And it's rather ironical. Having been in finance for now over 2 decades, I'm actually been close to technology again and again. So I'll do my best to give you a view today, more around as how I see AI from a broader bank perspective as an industry. I will preface it and say that this is like my personal views as I'm representing my personal, views on AI rather than Barclays view. But having said all of that, I hope today's like lecture, is hopefully informative, and very happy to kind of take questions after I do about 30 to 40 minutes of like talking. I really want it to be interactive. I'll take pauses in between to make it a bit more interactive with some, other trivia facts as well. And hopefully, your investment in this evening on Friday gives you something to take away outside this room as well. So with that, I'll make a start. And as we kind of take a step back and think about AI in banking and finance, I want to take a bigger picture to start with itself, right? So according to a UN study recently, there was roughly around $4.8 trillion expected AI market size by 2033, which is about 25 times what it was a couple of years ago. Of that 4.8 trillion dollars worth of market size, banks are expected to have a pocket share of about $300 billion. So clearly, there is a large volume of opportunity for banks to kind of keep an eye out, and we'll talk about that journey as to why it is relevant. Another kind of interesting fact is out of Fortune 1,000 companies, 9 out of 10 companies are embracing AI in some shape or form. So it is definitely something beyond just the banking sector, which is relevant to various corporates. And AI is definitely from a banking sector influencing trillions of dollars of assets under management, for example. And it isn't something new, right? We've had forms of AI, we call it classic AI now, or machine learning. Inception was back in 1950s. it started getting embedded into the academic circles in the 90s, was very much ingrained in mainstream banking in the 2010s itself. So that's not new. What's been new, since the GPT fever has been on the Gen AI, and we'll briefly touch on that as well. But before I do that, I want to kind of like do a bit of like a floor check. Does anyone want to guess? And you might already know, so you might be able to get the answer in first go. Does anyone want to hazard a guess of how much data is created every single day on our planet? It's in terabytes, so that's a starting unit I'm going to offer everyone. Does anyone want to take a shot and just guess how many terabytes of data are we creating every single day? 10,000, right? Anyone? Sorry? A trillion. Oh, so you just decided to go like big time, big scale. So that's a good one, right? 10,000. So you've got the answer in between there, right? So the answer is 440 million terabytes of data is being generated every single day. As we speak, this particular audio, there's a meta file being created. This particular presentation slide is data. You click some photographs, that's data. All of that is data. It's not information, it's data. Second question, but I'll answer it straight up, is how much data do we have as of 2025 period across all the different spaces? The answer is 175 zettabytes. You'll be like, what is a zettabyte? You might already know the answer. But just to make it visual for you, if you took a DVD and you put all that information in DVDs, and you started stacking up one on top of the other, you will be able to come up with a nice little tower as tall as 23 million miles, right? That is 100 times the distance between Earth and Moon. I love space, so I'll always put some space facts in whatever I speak, right? So it's incredible amount of data. So we have a serious amount of data out there. And for banks as well, we have a ton of data. We need to get to the information, and we need to kind of do that in a very. Today we have different automations, robotic processes. We have got various systems and algos and logics. As I said, machine learning has existed, but what was missing was how can we actually reduce the manual intervention of doing mundane activities and getting to the right data. And that's where the power of AI really kind of starts to unlock value. So banks, as I said, are not just dealing with high volume of data, but also high velocity of data. We have a lot of data which we are generating internally, which we are absorbing from external sources. And it's really important that we have a good way of managing that flow, and hence it's relevant. AI is relevant to financial services, and the banking sector. So that's why I would say AI is quite relevant. It's not just about how AI is being built, but also how AI is being used. There'll be plenty of conversations and rightful quarters on the engineering behind AI, but how you actually use it is really, really important. It's like a tool, right? If you don't know how to use the tool, there's no point actually having that tool itself. It can be more detrimental. If you don't know how to use the right instrument, it can harm you. So with that, I'll zoom in a bit more on AI in banking, right? So what do we think is the useful nature of AI in banking today itself? And the first example I would give is fraud and fraud prevention. We have seen various instances. You would have come across an instance in Hong Kong where an employee working in a Hong Kong bank was basically approached, got a video call, appeared to be the CEO of the bank along with the board members, and said, we need you to transfer via this funds immediately because we are doing a merger and you haven't transferred that fund. So the employee was suddenly, caught off guard, and they're like, "Oh, okay, fine. I'll just do that right away. 500 million Hong Kong dollars transferred." That was fake, deep fake, right? There are some real risks here, and AI is now trying to fight AI. So with the right kind of tools, you can now use AI to detect such kind of fraud and make sure that you're preventing it. And obviously, that still means that you have to be very cautious. Even without AI, we tend to get cold calls, right? And we have to kind of make sure we are not kind of getting duped here. So AI is basically giving a lot of concern to fraud, and that's definitely a use case we have seen quite actively being used. Chatbots. chatbots are here and have been here for a while, right? I'm sure each of you in your personal life would have gone maybe to book a ticket, for example, and you need to kind of find a way of rebooking it or whatever. It's been rather mundane, the chatbots, but now with the advent of Gen AI, for example, the bots have become quite impactful and useful. However, we need to be careful in where it is being used, and we want to make sure that it's not detrimental and we don't run the risk of hallucination. We'll talk a bit more about the risks in a bit, but we are definitely seeing a real boom of chatbots in various parts of the banking sector. Credit scoring. So many of you would relate or would perhaps on the forward look to kind of get a house loan, right? Or you might have one, so you don't need a loan, for example. But in that sector of credit lending, for example, there's a very clear role, which AI can play with regards to helping you doing credit scoring, for example. But I'll talk about the cons of that in a later section as well. But that's definitely a use case being looked at. But big picture for banks, a lot of the AI is still in pilot mode itself, right? We haven't really seen a whole scale adoption. We are seeing pockets of it where there has been a very clear transformation. But big picture, it is still, very much an experimental phase, gradually progressing from pilots to prod. And it's not a tech initiative only. It is a strategic initiative. We need to think about how we fundamentally reimagine our work itself, how business operates, how we end to end operate as a bank, and for that matter, any industry. It is actually quite thought provoking. Even in your personal lives, you can kind of use AI to kind of carry out a lot of your tasks and help you and support you. And interestingly, I would say that in personal life, you're able to use a lot more of AI features and facilities, because for corporates, a lot more restrictions, which I'll touch on the governance side of it as well in later in the section. But AI in banking is definitely something which is kind of progressing. And the key question then is, so where is AI delivering the impact? And that's quite important, because you don't want to do AI just for the namesake. You want to make sure it is an enabler. It's a tool to deliver or unlock value. I like to think of the four E's basically, right? It's effectiveness, efficiency. It's also about making sure that we improve our experiences and we expand our functionalities. So I'll start with the first, which is efficiency. So automating manual tasks are certainly something which are a very prime example of use cases which we have seen across the industries, including the banking sector. I'm sure many of you would have come across and perhaps used as well Copilot offered by Microsoft, where you are able to run minutes of a meeting or a lecture like this, for example, and you can quickly summarize by just sending a prompt and saying, give me the summary, which otherwise would mean that people are scribbling notes quickly and then deciphering. That's a very clear example of personal productivity, which has been improved on the back of these efficiency use cases. We've got various other manual tasks which are performed in banks, which are very much prime areas where we can use AI to kind of improve the way we are delivering value. Effectiveness, better decision making. That's something really critical for banks, because we have, like I said, various decisions at various points in time, right from the strategic decisions of how to approach our earnings to drive value for shareholders, to more operational decisions on driving which systems should be interacting with which systems, to tactical decisions on how best to kind of progress your day. At varying levels, you have to make decisions, and AI can be a very serious thought partner. I don't know if you have tried this, but in your own personal life as well, right? If you've got like a large language model in your mobile app, for example, you can say, hey, XYZ, it could be ChatGPT, it could be Grok, it could be Perplexity, whichever one you're using, be my thought partner, right? I am planning to do X. It could be I am planning to do my exercise regime. These are all my commitments during the week. These are the different things I'm eating. Try and help me hit this target and organize my day and every day guide me on what I should be doing. You'd be surprised. These things are pretty good. Now, you shouldn't blindly rely on it, because it might say things which don't make sense and it's hallucinating. But it's a pretty good, starting point for a support. So you can start to create your own little board through these, bots and chat bots, etc., to help you do whatever you're doing. we have to be a lot more careful and guarded when it comes to the banking sector. As I will touch on the risks section of it. With regards to the experience, we all have interacted in some shape or form with the banking sector, right? Whether that is in traditional sense with deposits and loans, or in more other advanced senses, you might be active in the stock market, for example. You would have already started experiencing forms of better UI which AI is unlocking. In fact, you can create a new kind of app literally in a matter of minutes. Some of you might be doing your kind of engineering and computer science and looking to kind of generate your computing skills. There's good news and bad news. English is the new programming language, right? Now literally anyone can start coding. The good news is, if you've got coding background, you know exactly how to kind of keep refining that code and getting it well. So it's definitely a great opportunity for all, in my opinion, to start embracing the change and trying to see how best you can unlock value on the forward. The experience is certainly getting better. The UIs are certainly getting better. And then expansion. I think different sectors, not just the banking sector, are looking to expand and offer new products, new services. It's really democratizing education as well, for example, right? It's a level playing field now. It's not a privileged few who will get access to information. It was like internet or the computers, which unlocked a lot of value. Now with AI, you literally need to just think about it and you'll get it. You'll get the power, like one of these large language models, for example. I won't name the model, but basically it's been trained on like 200 million books of information. Imagine having someone who has got gyan of like 200 million books next to you, ready to tell you whatever you want to know. It's a tremendous set of value, but you need to make sure that you use it for the right thing, and you always use the most sophisticated AI still, which is between your 2 ears, your own human brain. That is the most sophisticated intelligence. So it is really important to use it as a co-pilot and not an autopilot. So that definitely is one which I would say is a great use. And with that, I'll transition to the fourth topic I wanted to touch today in this talk, which is on use cases to capabilities. I think we all, would have potentially participated in things like hackathons, or, looked at different events which are about trying to solve problems and use AI to unlock that value. Even in like my example I gave on personal capacity, you can unlock value using Chat GPT and other kind of modules. The firms, corporates, are very keen to not think just about use cases. They are really keen on thinking of capabilities. You need to think of common capabilities of things which we need to unlock to really drive value for AI, because these are expensive investments, both initially and on a recurring basis. So you really need to make sure there's a thoughtful approach to themes of problems which can be solved rather than specific use cases only. So that's definitely something which is very much like a front of mind for the banking sector at large as well. There is also a lot of focus on making sure that we are not looking at it purely as a tech driven project, but as a strategic cross leadership initiative. So a lot of teams in the bank get involved in this particular process. No less than just the technology, the business teams, the transformation and the change groups, they all are at the epicenter of these discussions to formulate what is really important, a very clear approach and a strategy to try and drive the change. So use cases to capabilities is a very important transition, which we have seen. And then hence, with great power comes great responsibility. Yeah? The favorite words coming from Spider-Man. So you've got all this power of the large language model. How do you make sure it's being used in the right way? That's really important from a governance and trust perspective. You might think it's not the most exciting topic of governance and trust, but it's ever more important in this world of AI. What are the risks of using AI without, getting into the full laundry list? The key ones which come to my mind: number one, without doubt, hallucination. It gives you a very convincing answer. Let's say you have some symptoms and you say, AI, tell me what exactly this is. It says, it's this perhaps, and take this medication. And you blindly follow that. Guess what? It actually was not the right medication. It can really harm you. Imagine if you were trying to make like an investment decision, right? And you said, oh, I'll just go to Chat GPT and ask where should I put my funds? What's the best investment? It said X and Y, and you put all your funds in that, and it didn't perform well. Well, it can happen to even if you did it, individually. But if it just genuinely made a hallucination risk, then you've really like thrown your money down the drain. So it's really important to kind of consider with a pinch of, not a pinch of salt, a bucket of salt, when you get these responses, and think hard exactly if this is something which is verifiable. So explainability, which brings me to the second point, is really important. Auditability of that particular response is really important. So you would have heard the term responsible AI. That's really front and center of mind for a lot of organizations, and there's a lot of work being done across the industries to have frameworks. Obviously, regulators are really keen to make sure that there is a very thoughtful approach, a coherent approach, but that doesn't necessarily exist across borders. There's a lot of geopolitical dimensions to it when it comes to AI itself. So having the right kind of regulations, but not overly punitive and not overly disparate. Otherwise, for global institutions, it does become quite an interesting and challenging kind of backdrop. And we are noticing from an AI perspective, we have seen the EU regulators, for example, they have rolled out the EU AI Act. China rolled out their AI regulations. We have seen pockets in the US as well. So everyone, including the UK, there are pockets where regulations are being thought through to mitigate some of these risks. What are the other risks which come to mind? I gave the example of credit risk earlier on, right? Regarding loans. I'm sure many of you would have heard about the risk of bias and fairness of data. So imagine if I would just take my history of my data from lending for a bank X, and it lent to a certain demographic more than ever before previously. And I use that data to train my model to approve loan applications. And let's say it was underrepresenting a certain group. That's a big risk, right? That's not fair. That is biased. It's something which we have to be very careful. In this day and age of cancel culture, whose view is right and whose view is wrong? That in itself is quite an extensive, debatable topic. But for banks, in some ways, the good news is a lot of this is objective. You need to actually make sure you calibrate the right fairness and bias in your data, make it as far as possible measurable. Whatever gets measured gets done, and have very clear ethics and data councils going to senior levels of the organization to make sure that we are doing the right thing for the customers and our different stakeholders. So that's definitely one which I would call out. Opacity of these models, large language models especially. These large language models are very akin to our human brains, right? I think our human brain is made up of like something like 80 million neurons. I think maybe it's maybe more. So what exactly is happening in the large language models is not that dissimilar. You've got various nodes on which you've got the decision being made. It's not an oracle when it gives an output. It's a predictive machine. So it's very likely that it comes up with the answer, but you just don't know how to explain it. It's literally a black box. So there's extensive amount of work being done in the industry on how you can reverse engineer and explain those answers, and also LLMs which are good at explaining, and especially in the banking and financial sector, that's definitely a hot area of how we can make large language models more and more transparent so that we can explain to our stakeholders, including the regulators, how we're getting the answer. So that's definitely an area which is of prime focus. Another example I would give, which is kind of interesting, I gave the example of Copilot, right? A lot of different institutions are using Copilot. One of the interesting challenges, for Microsoft, for example, is like if you look at their Copilot module, if they have given it to Bank A, let's say a trader is using that to set up a pricing strategy, and it starts using it as a thought partner, like I mentioned earlier, and it says, I'm looking at this underlier, I'll give this price to it, and discusses a trading strategy. So it's interacted with that particular large language model. And if the bank has not set up the right kind of controls along with Microsoft, and if that information leaks out to, say, a different bank B, where the trader is also trying to formulate a strategy on the same underlier and asks Copilot to be a thought partner, and implicitly it gives the pricing values of bank A to bank B, that's not that different from insider trading. It's internal collusion. That's the technical term here. it's a real risk here. So we have to be very serious and critical about whatever we are doing, which is why banks, to come to my second point, how do they mitigate risks? It's through a lot of governance and a lot of controls. Um, yeah, it's really important. Like all different groups, security, data, legal, model risk management, there are various teams involved to make sure that whatever is being done, we are keeping in mind all the different concerns, including like data leakage, like the example I gave. Regulations, as I said, are evolving at varying paces. Geopolitical environment obviously adds a lot more nuances to it, but it's also not just about regulations and governance. One of the key elements I want to chat about today is the human factor, right? So the human factor, and hopefully this resonates with a lot of you in the room as well, right? Like several of you who are perhaps studying here at IIT right now would be thinking of jobs, and there's a lot of discussion in the media regarding jobs itself. What is AI? What's the impact of AI on the job market, for example? So here's a fun trivia for you, right? 6 out of 10 jobs today did not exist in the 1940s. So your grandparents were doing materially different jobs than you were. And that's to recognize that humans are a very adaptive species, right? We tend to evolve with time, we tend to evolve with the different circumstances provided to us. We are quite a resilient species. So, what's a job? In my opinion, jobs are made of two things: processes and skills. Skills are what you have learned, processes are what you do. So, the what and the how together, right? As I see it, processes are evolving at pace across industries, including the banking sectors, but especially across industries. And they will keep evolving. Skills, well, in the past, you would learn once and apply forever. So you would do your studies, you do your undergrad, you'll do your postgrad, and then you'll use those skills and you'll run a career forever. Things have changed now, right? Even pre AI, it was more like you learn continuously and then you thrive consistently. These are not my words, these are words from Jeff Woods. He has written a book, a very good book, AI Driven Leadership. And essentially, in my opinion, not too long ago, maybe a decade ago, um, every 5 years you have to reinvent yourself, right? You need to kind of keep up with the times, you need to upskill yourself, and make sure that you are really relevant in whatever you're doing. That period is reducing. At 5 years, is probably now around 2 years. And it's only going to reduce further and further, right? It's going to become a year and probably less than a year and not more than a year's time. The reason I say that is once you complete your studies from here, you will need to continue to study even beyond as well. That's the exciting part. And I think it's quite an exciting time, in fact, in my opinion, to join the workforce, because you will not be doing a mundane thing continuously. You'll be challenged every single day, but also it's an opportunity to thrive if you are willing to put in the hard yards of learning. Just before coming today, right? And I knew I've got a very interesting crowd in front of me, which will ask me some great questions straight after this. There was a GPT-5 launch from Sam Altman and team, and he was talking about how the latest model now is having PhD level responses to all the questions, and no longer you need to choose between a deep learning model versus a swift answer, timeliness versus accuracy. You don't need to kind of do the trade-offs. Things like this every single day will keep evolving. If you don't keep up with the times, it's very hard for you to kind of make sure that you are being as productive as you can. Now, it doesn't mean every single person in an organization needs to do this job of constantly monitoring what's happening. But I would implore to each of you, if you keep up with it, you are keeping up with the times, and you can actually influence whoever is driving that in your organization in the future, or for that matter, be the one who's driving that change in themselves. It's very much that same innovation mindset which this institute really drives home, which I'm really excited that we can be at the forefront together. The other point I would make is what types of jobs I think on the forward would be quite relevant, right? So as I said earlier, English is the new programming language. I think the ability to ask questions is really important. I have a daughter who's 7-year-old and another daughter who's 11-month-old, right? I was sitting with my wife who works at Meta, and we were discussing So what is the type of skills we think for our children we should try and encourage them to do? It's very hard to see what's going to happen 10, 15 years from now. The one thing after long discussion we both agreed on is we need to encourage her to ask questions. Because if we ask her to ask questions, or well, I don't need to ask her, she asks me a lot of questions, my elder one, uh, she, they will get better at framing the questions. They'll be better at framing the prompts. They'll be better at thinking of the goals, the context, setting expectations. What is the expected outcome? The GCSE, as we in the UK kind of refer, that's like the equivalent of boards in the UK. And so GCSE is like a great acronym whenever you're writing a prompt. And so prompt engineering is right there, right? Models, for example, are here to stay. A lot of what we do will stay, but will evolve. To my earlier comment on processes, they will evolve, but we need to keep upskilling. So, from a human perspective, I would say it's time for co-intelligence. Co-intelligence where we work with AI, either for AI to come up with the first draft and then we refine it, or we come up with the first draft and AI refines it, whichever combination of it. And the answer varies from person to person, use case to use case. But co-intelligence is something which we are definitely entering that era. So you can start using it as a thought partner, as a challenger, as an interviewer. Literally, like before coming today, I connected and I was told that there's this lecture series today. So I was invited yesterday evening after work. So I sat down and I said, okay, now I have to prepare for this session. How will I prepare? So I said, come on, AI, let's start doing this together, right? So I'm not exaggerating. It really helped me, right? It did like a PhD level research on all the different topics which I could have spoken about. And it gave me plenty of things to consider. It came up with the first draft, but I refined it because I had my points which I wanted to convey to you today. And that's how you have to find the right balance and how you want to use it going forward. There's also a big risk here of automation complacency, right? We all get very, very reliant on our AI bots and they drive the show. And then we don't actually understand how things work. This was the case with before AI as well. It can be more pronounced as well. So that's a very big caution. And I think the risk has to be addressed by each person by themselves. Organizations will also have guardrails. But again, make sure automation complacency doesn't set in. Because that again is a recipe for challenge. And then it's about how do you balance the three, right? EQ, IQ, and AIQ, right? AI quotient, as in how do you think of adopting AI where it's relevant, etc. EQ and IQ is well socialized. So here's a fun kind of statement, right? Like in my opinion, IQ helps you get a job, EQ helps you get promoted, and AIQ makes sure that you don't get replaced by a bot, right? So it's like that's on a lighter vein, but it's in some ways kind of true. So you really need to kind of think about how you are going through your own careers and how, irrespective of where you are, whether you're a seasoned professional or starting your career, you need to kind of really think hard on how you're balancing the three. And then the third one, which I think is a really not spoken too much about, but it's really important, is well-being, right? We live in a digital era, social media. We spend a lot of time on our phones, and that there's a risk that it increases more, right? As you get like more and more AI, for example. So when I think about that, I think about like the physical well-being to start with. And I think I gave an example of how like AI, I'm sure some of you are wearing smartwatches and it tells you periodically raise your hands, stand up, walk a bit. So it's in many ways using, some formulation of algos to guide based on your motion on how exactly you should be more physically active. But you can use AI to kind of actually help you be physically fit, to my earlier example. And it's very important to do that, because if you don't do that, there's a clear risk that we become a very complacent species and we are completely driven by AI. Mental well-being, that's a big topic with AI, right? How do we make sure we talk about things like job security? How do we think about upskilling? How do we think about making sure that we are still having a cognitive power and not just resigning it all down to a bot? So it's really important to kind of keep ourselves mentally fit, and again, not being over reliant on bots, even though bots have a very interesting use case in the medical sector, for example. right, to help you identify various different things which otherwise would take you a long lead time. So there's definitely a use case beyond, but even within the banking and financial sector, mental and physical well-being, and for that matter, any industry, I think AI has a role to play, but it's a double-edged sword. It can also be a cause of concern if it's not addressed properly. And I guess then, kind of thinking more broadly, how do we kind of move, changing gears here, move from just tactical AI to enterprise AI? So a lot of organizations, as I said earlier, are in this experimental phase, in some cases much more progressed. But the journey essentially is moving from experimentation to operationalization of those experiments to eventually scaling them at pace. We are definitely seeing a very clear need across industry on a very clear vision, very clear investment, and a very well understood change management process. So that's certainly something which is front and center of mind. And leadership is definitely not just about formulating our tech approach, but a business strategy around it. It's not just about how you deploy AI, but how do you do your business in a more effective way, enabled by automation and other forms of AI. Many times you don't need AI to address a problem. You just need some simple deterministic approaches and automation. And so this brings me nicely into what are the emerging frontiers on the AI space. And there are plenty of them, right? In terms of trends to start with. We have discussed about co-pilots, we have spoken about Gen AI. I think synthetic data is a very interesting one. Data is very much one of the precious commodities. Oil is no longer the most precious commodity. I gave the example of data and the volume of data we have. And for information to be relevant, we definitely need to make sure we are using all the different forms of AI capabilities. Synthetic data is one of prime relevance where you don't have complete data. And synthetic data is something where you can use AI to kind of create forms of data which can be useful, even though they are proxies at best. Quantum AI, the cost of AI is quite expensive. Per a recent study, to train one of the large language models is the equivalent of the amount of energy being used by Netherlands as a country for a full year. Right, so there's a lot of energy consumption. Quantum computing is definitely a very much a frontier area of research to try and see how it can enable AI at a cheaper pace and a faster pace, for sure. Agentic AI is very much here and now. Like literally, Microsoft have their agents off the shelf called Research Agent, using deep learning, analyst agent. So they're literally like good at quantitative or qualitative, exercises. And agents are something where human in the loop or human over the loop is very much like on the forefront. So agents here in banks are quite relevant, at least in terms of currently in the exploratory stages, where you can see certain activities which agents can help do autonomously within parameters you have defined. So you define the system prompt of what you would like the agent to do, and then it goes about doing it for you. So that's definitely a frontier which is being explored. I'll put forward a speculative view as well, right? Like, and this is actually happening. Some people initially would joke and say, what would you do when you grow up? People would say, I want to work in a bank. I want to do this. Now people will turn around and say, I want to run a bank. I want to create a bank. I'll create a bank by myself with the army of agents. It's a speculative view. I'm not quite confident we are there yet. But yeah, we dare to dream. And I won't be surprised. There will be other industries for sure initially where some of that may happen. A cab driver in US, for example, the best cab driver in US is probably 50-60% better than the average cab driver in US. But now with the power of AI, a person who's starting up a company powered by AI could be 1,000 times more efficient than someone who isn't. So the delta is significant if you use it quite optimally. So leaders need to prepare for not just a linear change, but an exponential change. So I expect people to start embracing this space in a way which is going to be quite important, quite deliberate. And the type of skills, which brings me next to the leadership lessons, the type of traits we would want to see in leaders is to have the strategic foresight to try and think of what could happen next. And no one can get it right, but at least be proactive about it. Have ethical grounding, have the basis of responsible AI very much part of your DNA, and be tech fluent, because technology is here to stay and keep evolving. And if you can, you know, embrace the disruption, you can be the power behind it as well. Like, I would definitely say the best leaders won't be just the ones who are using AI, but the ones who are going to be shaping the society with AI. And this brings me nicely into my conclusion statements on leading the future. I would implore each of you to kind of think and reflect on how you are doing whatever you're doing and how AI could help you. In same breath, how AI could disrupt you. What are the risks you are facing in your personal day-to-day life, but then professionally also? How can you leverage the power of AI to upskill yourself, train yourself, and be prepared for what's going to come next, which is going to be, in many ways, part of life. AI is not going to be completely disruptive, and everyone's not just going to be talking about AI. There'll be something new in a few years' time. But for now, make sure you're AI literate so you're aware of what you're dealing with. And finally, I will say, like, at the end of the day, I'll go back to my original statement. AGI and everything is coming up right now. The most intelligent form are all of you, humans. So make sure you are in the driver's seat. Decide how you want AI to drive your story and your journey. That's true for banks, and that's true for finance, and that's true for all of us in individual life. So thank you again for your time today. I open the floor for Q&A now. Thank you. Yeah, sure. Yeah, so for everyone's benefit. Okay, there you go. Do you want to, so everyone can hear?
Yeah, okay. So I'll repeat the question. So recently, I heard, like a lot of consulting firms, like for example, being in BCG, have started building their own inbuilt AI tools, similar to what for example, ChatGPT is, which is trained on their own internal data that they have been working on for their entire history. So this essentially saves a lot of the groundwork or research that would be done by consultants or humans who join as freshers from colleges like IITs. So, is it true? Is this something similar happening in the banking industry also?
It's a good question. So it's true not just of consultants, but various organizations across the industry. They're creating small language models. They're fine tuning large language models. They're making sure they're closed loop large language models. They're training existing large language models on their domain itself. There are variety of forms of training of models. Some are claiming that they have got now fine tuned models for financial services, for example. So there are a variety of different approaches different institutions are following. You're absolutely right. It's not just the consultants. There are plenty of vendors, right? You can name any single vendor today to the banking sector, and they have a Gen AI version of it, right? They are enabling a version, because even in your personal capacity, within a day, within few hours, you are able to create exactly what you said, which is create a bot on a certain domain of information, make it accessible, which you can summarize, access, etc., etc. And it's very powerful. So the example you gave of some of the consulting firms, imagine they have been working with several organizations for various decades, have tons of presentation, have tons of information, some structured information, several unstructured information bytes, and they're trying to organize that, make it accessible to all their consultants so they can go and do their consulting work more proactively. That's absolutely true. You can have that same analogy on any sector, including the banking sector. The interesting challenge is, do you go the full distance and create a full large language model? That's a real significant investment. We're talking about not millions, but billions of dollars. Now, obviously, as the cost of an investment becomes cheaper of creating large language models, that may change. But today, again, notwithstanding my comment earlier on quantum computing, a lot of them are using existing models, establishing the right system prompts around it, defining domain on the information which should be used, but they run the risk that the models have been trained on a vast, broader data set. So then they need to mitigate the risk of how do you make sure there's no hallucination risk. So that's definitely one of the challenges they are also facing. Thank you. Yeah, please. I'll just get you the mic.
suppose you make like a consumer facing chatbot, like you said, and it hallucinates. So who do you hold responsible or accountable? Like suppose something happens adverse.
Yeah. So again, like generally, what I've seen till now, like offering Gen AI powered customer facing bots outside of the banking sector is more prevalent. You can't mess around telling your customer a balance which is wrong, right? Because it's hallucinating, and that can be catastrophic for their life, right? So a lot of these bots, a lot of Gen AI powered bots, you wouldn't expect them to hit mainstream anytime soon until the explainability hallucination risks have reduced. But what you have started to see is a lot of other industries having started to roll out these Gen AI powered, because if it's wrong, it's not going to change your life. It may not get it right, but the reputational damage won't be as significant. Um, you make another rather interesting point on legal liabilities, which is a whole separate conversation with lawyers in the room. It's an interesting profession for lawyers as well, right? Because in some ways, each of you can become like a default lawyer now. Because if you've got a something on property law, you want to suddenly kind of write something, you can just ask GPT; it will come up with it. But lawyers will stay in business because there'll be a lot of suits and countersuits because of all the liabilities which will happen. So, which is why varying organizations have taken either very cautionary or a very aggressive approach to AI, and for rightful reasons, right? Depends on their appetite to kind of drive innovation, but also then suffer the risks as well. So yeah, we haven't really seen a lot of that hit the industry, but it will once we have mitigated the risks. Cheers, thank you. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming over this evening, and all the best for whatever you're driving here at IIT. Thank you very much for having me. Take care.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gaurav Sawhney, for that deeply insightful and inspiring session. Your talk on AI for banking and finance has given us compelling view of how emerging technologies are reshaping the financial landscape. It's been an honor to hear your perspective and experience, especially as a distinguished alumnus of IIT Madras. To express our gratitude, I would now like to invite Phyllis Thomas to kindly come forward and present a token of appreciation to Mr. Sawhney.
Before I give the memento to him, I just wanted to thank all the people who have assembled here. Okay, so I think some of you would know that we both are batchmates. So he has graciously agreed to stay back for some more time if somebody has a one-on-one question. So stay back after you get the snacks. Now Gaurav, in the last year, he has been here for 3 times. You have been in the campus, and he has had a lot of discussion with the faculty and with the alumni and corporate relations office, where his company is looking at funded and non-funded modes of engagement. So that is something that we are very grateful for the discussion that you have with the faculty. Thank you for that. And then he had multiple sessions even today. So he had a podcast wherein I think he touched in this session also about what a job is. Okay, so that is a different perspective. Like you are telling, actually, it is process and then skills. Okay, process will obviously improve upon time. You don't have to worry about that. But skill is something which is in our hand. Okay, so that is something that we should be prepared, and it is our accountability. And the second, he had an alumni interaction with his DOMS batch, and then there he was telling this is one of the time where you every person, irrespective of what kind of profile you are, whether you are an engineer or whichever, whether you're working experience or non-experience, this is a good time for you to actually step up and reach a level where it was impossible earlier. So that is, I think that is a positive note. And then secondly, I like to thank Sweta, who is my colleague, without which this LLS wouldn't have been possible. She is not here. She went to another engagement. And then I'll thank Jeshna, who's been our outreach team. So she interacts with all the departments. I also want to thank my marketing team. None of them are here, but Sunita's team, they take care of how to reach the LLS to each of the students and then make sure that his talk is available in our system for future generations. I'll also want to thank Colonel Tensing. Tensing is our batchmate, and then he came in a short notice with his wife and students. So I'm really thankful for you to grace this occasion. I thank each of the students who have been here for the session, without which it wouldn't actually make much of an impact. I thank my intern, Supraja is there. I thank Priyanshu, he is also there. So we have a lot of interns who work in alumni and corporate relations. So if anybody is interested, reach back to our HR. So we run as a normal department. We have 60 people staff. So our main objective is to raise funds for IIT that help your research. So it helps your research, your scholarships. So that is our job. And this talk has been started from 2011. The perspective of the talk is to make sure you get more inspiration and life experience from people who have achieved professionally in their life. So with that, I wanted to give a small token of memento to Gaurav.
Thanks for this. I just had one final word of thanks to Phyllis and Tenzing sir. It was a pleasant surprise to see you here, and Phyllis has been tremendous. So these are great pics as well, by the way. Yeah, he asked me to kind of dig out my old pics, and I don't know where you are, sir. I'm trying to find. Yeah, no, I know. I'm saying Tenzing sir. Oh yeah, you're sitting. Yeah, right there, over there, in the middle, on the top, right? So yeah, matter of few gray hairs here, gray hairs there. This guy, he's beating time like something. But no, it's absolutely fantastic. It's been a pleasure to see you all, here in the campus. As Phyllis said, I'm very happy to catch up with you offline as well. I can't be more grateful to this institute. In fact, when I brought my wife, she said she's feeling nostalgic, even though she didn't study here, and it's always a pleasure to kind of come back to the university. So I hope to see you all, on the forward as well. But thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you everyone who's organized a beautiful event, a series of events. I may add, today everyone at my office was like, "You have a more busy schedule in the second half." I said yes, but it's absolutely not work. It's a pleasure totally to be here. Thank you. Thanks.
So thank you everyone for this wonderful evening, and we look forward for more sessions with you, sir. Thank you everyone.